We have Kalpen Parekh, who is the CEO of DSP Mutual Fund, and Roongta, who is a registered investment advisor, a SEBI registered investment advisor. Welcome, Harsh, Kalpen, and Pranjal.
It's on me, so I'm very nervous.
Which is why I've kept you separately and I've kept them separately, so that there's no throat slinging. Okay, so Pranjal, we'll get to the specifics as we go along. Just to set the context of the panel, you're a pretty popular financial influencer. There are many other financial influencers out there who are as popular. I was checking your YouTube channel. You have about 4.7 or 4.8 million subscribers. Others have also been as prominent or even more prominent also. There's obviously an audience for financial influencers out there. Whether it's good or bad, we'll discuss it as the event goes. But, why are so many people queuing outside your door to listen to what you have to say? I mean, how differently are you doing things that, let's say, an industry which is 36-year-old industry, or even advisors and distributors who have been there, that they haven't been able to do? Can you put that into context for us?
If I am to be brutally honest, there are two ways about it. One is almost all Finfluencers, as now this category is called, are unregulated. So I'm one of the very rare regulated ones. And when you're unregulated, you're not playing by the same rules. You're not bound by the same disclosure requirements, the same rules that registered entities have to go through. And that gives you a lot of leeway to play around. So that's one. And second is, a lot of content that's consumed in the name of finance is actually creators providing entertainment. Saying things like, instead of buying a Royal Enfield bike, if you would have invested in the stock. And what would I do? Would I walk for the next 20 years of my life? Advices like these. If you would have invested 40 years ago in a particular stock, your amount will be this, and things like that. So if you sell bite-sized packet of entertainment disguised as finance, people are hooked to it. And you're able to do it because others can't. The reputed players can't. Just to give you an example, why does all crypto apps are from new players and no players like HDFC or Kotak brings in crypto app? Because they don't want to be on the wrong side of the regulation. Whereas someone who has nothing to lose takes that risk to be on the wrong side of the regulation. And which is where I think, this discussion of SEBI coming up with a guideline to ensure regulation for influencers is important, because, influencers sell all kinds of things. We sell technology, mobile reviews, beauty product reviews. But say if I'm a tech influencer and I recommend someone to buy a wrong phone out of, being compensated, and a customer buys the wrong mobile phone, probably he'll lose 10, 15,000 or 20,000. But if I, under the influence of money, sell someone a wrong insurance policy, his family's life would be in ruins. So the onus on Finfluencers is much more than any other influencer. And which is why I think this is a great step. We should be regulated.
Okay, fair enough. And we'll get into regulations a little later. But Harsh, let me bring you in. You are a SEBI-registered RIA. I mean, if anyone over here knows the intensity of advisor regulations by SEBI, it's you. Just to play the devil's advocate, I know that you guys are heavily regulated, but because of the strict regulations, because of the compliance, you have to have a compliance officer, you have to maintain telephone records, you have to maintain so many things, because of which your costs, goes up. As a result of which, registered investment advisors don't really cater to the retail investors. Okay, a 5,000 or a 10,000 or a 1,000 SIP customer walking into your office won't make monetary sense for you. And your RIAs have traditionally catered mostly to rich investors, HNI investors. So I know that your community is up in arms against financial influencers, but just to play the devil's advocate, if the influencers are talking to the retail population, why is it so, in your assessment, bad when RIAs themselves are not really, talking or entertaining retail investors, a very, very bottom of the pyramid retail investors?
So first of all, I have not really as in profession, I haven't really heard, or myself personally, we haven't said that Finfluencers are bad. I think they've bought, as your panel title says, they've bought democratization on advice. So it's good. They've bought finance to the masses, right? It is very difficult to catch the attention of a 20-year-old or a 24-year-old who's just started earning to now look at financial assets. If that has been achieved, how it has been achieved is something else. But if that has been achieved, there are lessons that I think we ought to learn. And just let me give you a parallel example, simple. I'm very much into health and wellness, longevity, health lifespans and things like that. Now, am I qualified to talk about it? I don't have a medical degree. I do a fair amount of research. I do a lot of self-experimentation on that. So obviously, my family is fully involved. I talk to them. When I talk to them, I'm not telling them, be careful. They know that I'm not a doctor. Now, I meet you. Okay, you're a good friend. I want you to benefit from the things that I have learned. But when I advise you, okay, I will tell you, see, this is what I have learned. I've self-experimented. Okay, but before you start anything, please talk to your doctor. Okay. Now, I have a little bit of, I don't have 5 million followers that Pranjal has. And Pranjal, by the way, should have been sitting on this side because both of us are RIAs. But basically, if I have some following, right? And if I am telling them something, I think there is and it is something as important as health. Money comes a little down, but not much down, right? If it is something that can affect their health adversely, if there is a possibility, I think it is incumbent upon us, upon me, to be able to tell people कि भाई मैं qualified नहीं हूँ इसके लिए, this is what I have learned, and look at this could be beneficial to you. That's where regulations help. Regulations bring credibility.
So one thing, obviously, what I'm picking up from you are saying is the distinction between what is investor education and what is financial advice. Kalpen, the line is...
Just one more point.
Sure.
One more point. I think the responsibility, if I'm getting compensated, if suppose I'm saying I take certain supplements, and now I go to the supplement guy and say, hey, you know what? A lot of people can be influenced by what I say. Do you want to pay me something if I, take your name? And there are supplement guys who are incidentally willing to pay, right? If I'm doing that, and if I don't disclose that fact, I think that is bordering on, it's not bordering, I think that's plain wrong. Because conflict of interest is a very, very powerful thing, which to some extent the impact can be mitigated through disclosure that makes sense, not disclosure that is added at the bottom star and subject to terms and
endorsements, and also when you're giving advice, when you're not, let's say, a trained professional in that field. So Kalpen, you've been an effective communicator yourself I can say that in the Indian mutual funds industry, you could call yourself an influencer, but of course you are a mutual fund CEO, you can't, cross the line. But you have been using the platform to communicate simple concepts like SIPs. You have been having conversations with your son to explain international investing, SIPs, and etc. But my question is that, giving investor education is one thing, giving financial advice is another. And the line is drawn in sand. We've seen, many influencers give, videos on cryptocurrencies, for instance, in the last 1 year. And, nowhere in the video do they say that, invest in cryptocurrency, but they make it so glamorous, they make it so charming that eventually people get swayed, oh, it's the next big technology, let's invest. So where do you draw the line? And what is financial advice? And because once you define that, I suppose then regulations can also pinpoint saying that, this advice, maybe it did not work.
So Kaizad, I think we should be realistic about what can be done and what's possible, and more so in the world of investing, which is one multi-dimensional and hundreds of variables, and where the outcomes are also never certain, they are probabilistic. You may think X and Y may happen. drawing that line is a challenge, and creating boundaries through just regulation alone is not easy. So completely, welcome the point that Pranjal started off by saying that some broad regulations to harmonize the rules of transparency, skin in the game. RIAs or fund managers have, skin in the game. So likewise, what role or what skin in the game can anyone else who's giving advice, all of that needs to be harmonized. And I think the recent paper by SEBI, indicating these direction is welcome. But the bigger point I'm trying to say is that, the whole approach here should be what is right to do should be the starting point. And anyone who is venturing in the field of giving advice, either because of his job today, let's say it's my vested interest that, I give advice which can draw investors towards my fund house or my industry. I think the starting point starts from your personal value system that if I can, recommend my sister or my brother or my mother or my father to invest their money in this product, I'm happy to give that advice to anyone and everyone with all the disclaimers that I can still be wrong. But if I'm never going to put my own money and I'm still advising, then that is where the risk starts coming in. The second thing is, I also feel that as a consumer of this advice, as a consumer of listening to all the advisors, whether you call them Finfluencers or XYZ, the consumer also needs to know that there's nothing finite in this world. And I'll give you two examples. 2 years back, I was extremely fascinated by Kathy Woods of ARC. And the way she was running her business model, the way they were putting out their analyst reports and everything publicly. And I should tell my team also, कि कुछ सीखना चाहिए. And how did I know about her? Only through social media. So social media has democratized access, and sitting here in Mumbai, I could think about someone like that. And there was a lot of influence. Maybe her intention was right or wrong, I'm not debating that. 1 year later, I bumped into accidentally a guy called Christopher Bloomstein, who actually, point by point highlighted why that business model is completely flawed and why that type of investing will lead to accidents. So as a consumer, I had access to both and opposite sides of the coin, but somewhere, then you apply your reason, your sort of understanding to take those decisions. If consumers want to get carried away with, nice music and dance and then, put their hard-earned money to risk, I don't think you can blame others. It's very important that today my son wants to, he goes for his engineering classes. He doesn't go to an influencer YouTube program to learn engineering course. He goes to a bloody class and he spends 9 hours there every day to learn and study. I think that balance is very important, where we as investors also, recognize what is right for our hard-earned money. We work so hard to earn our money, but we virtually don't do any hard work to know where do we seek advice from. So partly the balance will come when investors give up on their greed on one hand, and of course the responsibility from the side of advisors or whoever is giving that advice is far more, that we cannot give that advice which we don't believe in. And the next point that I always keep to myself, I tell this to myself, I remind this to myself, I tell this to my team, is that anything in investing for that extra return that we have earned will come only because of the extra risk we have taken. And there are times that risk will not work. There are times that risk will backfire. And what will happen when that happens, there can be temporary loss. There can be, lesser returns. Talk about risk as much. We always say there are two sides of the coin. But generally, I've seen that we all get swayed by the positive side of the dimension. See, today, if you keep a topic of $100 trillion of the fund industry, there'll be more people to listen to it. But if you say that, for the next 2-3 years, we'll remain at 40 lakh crores, maybe no one will want to listen to it. So the bias towards optimism is so embedded in anything related to money that advisors or influencers or finfluencers, whatever you call, or investors themselves, everyone is swayed by extra optimism. And that is where that balance is required. The world is not one-sided. The world is not always about positive returns. There is the other side, which is risk. The rule that I've kept for myself is always show risk first. If you show risk first, most things will fall in place. Now, if I tell an investor, so I give a real-life example. There is a fund, and many fund houses have these type of products, which have completed 25 years. So it's very easy for me to come up with an ad that in these 25 years, the fund has gone up by 80 times. It will have great number of likes. But if I say that to get that 80 times, you had 4 phases of zero returns for 3 to 4 years. You had 2 phases of 50% loss of capital temporarily.
Or a simple thing like how many investors actually stayed for 20.
So in the same fund which has gone up by 20 times, 80 times, there are 26 investors who have stayed invested in a journey of 25 years. So for 25 years of history and only 26 investors have stayed through. So the point I'm making is when you talk of risk, it is less fashionable. It is not entertainment like he said. Talking about risk is not entertainment, but we are not in the business of entertainment. We are not Vidya Balans who will say that, this movie will sell if there is entertainment, entertainment, entertainment. Last point, yet I would love to learn how to make risk-based communication entertaining. I would love to learn how to, talk the language of the consumer. One area where Finfluencers, we need to learn from them is how can they talk the language of the consumer, what they talk every day. When I talk of Sharpe ratio and beta and, what is Fed going to do, my sister, brother, mother, wife, son will not understand anything. So if we are able to, change the narrative from either or to and take the best of both, I think there is a huge opportunity to democratize advice without diluting advice. Currently, both are happening. The topic of the session was, is it democratizing or diluting? I think both are happening. It is getting democratized, but anything in scale also dilutes.
Okay. Harsh, what about registered investment advisors? I mean, you all have, amassed customers over a long period of time. And, you were seeing how the communication is now changing from when financial influencers have come into the market and the way they communicate. Has that had any repercussions or in the sense that influence on the way you all communicate to your customers? Because you will, after all, support generations of generations. Like, I mean, somebody in their 50s and 60s, and eventually, when their children come into the workforce, you and your firm will now have to speak to them as well. So has that led any impact or change in the way you communicate with your customers?
Obviously, I think, so first of all, the profession itself is pretty young. The regulations themselves came out in 2013. You could say that it got formalized that. Advisors have always been around. It got formalized and rules came into play in 2013.
CFPs were there, certified financial planners, fee-based planners.
Little bit before that, right? So my point is, has it changed? Obviously it's changed. Hasn't it changed in every sphere? Okay. Again, I would just like to take the example of medicine and what it has changed for me, and then I'll quickly come to how it has changed. What it has done now, when anything happens, and I've seen both the eras, right? So before that, the doctor would give me a medicine and, I would take it and, wouldn't typically get better. Now, I ask the doctor various questions. Okay, why are you giving this to me? What are the side effects? Are there anything else? Is there an alternative that I can do? Okay, so what has that done? Now the doctor expects these questions. I think he is a much better professional because of that, right? So coming to the, finance to us, what it has made us do is that we have to be on our toes, right? When we know clients are going to ask questions, we better have whatever answers we want to have, right? That, I think, is a very, very positive development in terms of making the profession more interactive. One of the things that at least I practice personally is that, the crypto craze. And there would be clients, and as you mentioned, a lot of our clients happen to have a lot of money, right? So when they come up with this kind of a thing, one of the things that we have done is that, can you make this part of your discretionary fund? Okay? This discretionary fund doesn't go into any of your planning. We will probably not even take it into asset allocation, except to take a certain percentage for the discretionary allocation. You want us to account for it, we'll account, otherwise we'll not account. Very clearly, we'll not charge a fee on it, so that in the future, I can remind you that, this was not something I had recommended, right? What that has done, and there will be comebacks, right? There will be good advice that they might get. Those advice might work for a time. On cryptos, when I told clients I don't know, there would be a couple of clients who says, how can you be an advisor and not know about crypto? I said, I don't know. Okay, I can't be expected to know about everything. So coming back, it's a huge opportunity in that sense, in the sense that some of the untried things, which, unregulated finfluencers have the ability to propagate, probably will end badly. Okay? And some of that blowback obviously will come back to professionals like us. That is the opportunity. The threat, the financialization that we have seen, the, huge thrust in financialization that we have seen, in that blowback, not all of them are going to come back and remain in the financialized system. Some of them are saying, ye bahut naya cheez dekh liya, let's go back to the good old gold and land. And I think that is a big damage generally to the society, to the country, to the world actually. So I think that would be a real pity.
Pranjal, you and Kalpen both spoke about the element of entertainment that's very much prevalent in the Finfluencer space. But how do you retain the sanctity of a financial advice? I mean, where does entertainment stop and where does genuine advice or genuine gyan begin?
See, I'll answer this through the evolution of Finfluencers, and I think our evolution has to go with all the malpractices that were to an extent happening earlier and were not out in the public. So for example, when I used to say that direct plans are much cheaper, don't mix insurance and investment. I thought traditional, because advisors also came 7-8 years ago. So before that, insurance was commission backed. So people started trusting me and influencers like me because we were telling them a side of financial product that no one was telling. So when I say them auto sweep, you can get more out of your savings account, or direct plans in mutual funds. That is how we built trust, which in my mind also happened because the traditional participants were not telling the people enough. So that is how we trust built. And we were honest back then as a group, because we were not being incentivized. Back then, 4 years ago, no one was paying Finfluencers.
That's the problem. No? Because today you've become so famous
that we are corrupt. We are corrupt because what has happened is VC money has flowed in the fintech sector. And when that money flows into the fintechs, it eventually comes to us. And that amount is huge. Just to give you an example, I'm very upfront about this. In the last 2 years, 2020, 2021, I would have left at least 1 crore rupees on the table by not promoting cryptos. That to someone who doesn't have alternate sources of cash flows and it's just starting is huge. I'll tell you an example. This is really funny. One time I've taken money for cryptos because that brand was so desperate to have me, and I'm against cryptos. Finally, they offered me, okay, you come to our platform and you criticize cryptos. I said, if you're giving me money to criticize cryptos, sure, I'm coming to you. So there's one video of me talking to a founder of a crypto app where I've criticized, and he was ready to pay me money for that. That was the amount of desperation with which money was coming in. And it's really sad in the sense that in my mind, I was trying to educate public about the wrongdoings in the financial industry. And right now, us as a group are the widest source of misinformation. So in fact, we have become the evil that we started out to defeat in a way. And I think as long as financial incentives are this huge, which is where I believe that disclosures, so SEBI coming up with the consultation paper, I think there's one key difference is there's no KYC in social media. All other financial entities can do KYC. Therefore, they are in a contractual obligation with their customer. They know who their customer is. And they can choose to accept or refuse a customer. We can't do that. So therefore, I think any strict regulation coming up is liable to be struck down based on violation of free speech. So as hardly as I want a regulation, I think in order to be, and there's also one point, there's no entry barrier. So whom do you regulate?
Also platforms, because today the emergence of like after Elon Musk took Twitter, there were so many other names being circulated.
And there's no entry barrier. I mean, even to become an mutual fund distributor, there's certain amount of process. So you know whom to regulate, those who have completed that formality. But social media, how do you create that entry barrier? You need an entry barrier to be able to regulate. So I think either self-regulation, because if tomorrow.
What about endorsements?
So yeah, that's my first point. I think the worst financial advice is the one which include product promotions. incentives are huge. A influencer knows he or she is doing the wrong thing, but I think everyone has a price probably. That happens. So I think one clear way to start off the regulation is to make sure to have a, maybe standard operating procedure that if it's incentivized, how do you disclose it? Because, right now the platforms, so Instagram has a paid partnership label, YouTube has this video has paid content label, but that's just for the sake of it. That's not enough. Everyone misses it. It's meant to miss. So I think how to disclose, it needs to be very, very clear. And if it, it needs to be absolutely upfront that these are the 3 steps, 4 steps that you need to follow. No vagueness around it, and everyone has to follow it. That needs to be the first.
Okay. Kalpen, last question. We are really running out of time. But speaking of paid endorsements, giving money to financial influencers to say what you want them to say, some mutual funds have been engaging with financial influencers. What is your opinion on that? I mean, do you engage? What's your opinion on the other fund?
So, I look at this as any advertisement.
How do you regulate that?
Sure. So my point is that when I give an ad in a newspaper, it is paid endorsement. When I give an ad on digital platforms, I'm still paying for an advertisement. Likewise, if I were to do something with a Finfluencer, it is paid. I think the starting point is what is the intent of doing it, and what are the guidelines you are giving. So even like we have a very strong guideline internally in terms of we have a checklist. We have a score that which influencer do we want to partner with, if at all, and what is the message. The messaging is controlled by us, and as long as we are very clear. So I'll give you an example. When around a year back we launched a global innovation fund, our messaging was very clear, only SIPs. Because we were seeing that space, while it has very good long-term potential, but has also run up a lot over the last decade. And of course, we didn't know when is the correction going to start. So the only messaging was only via SIP. So there are strong guidelines that we keep in mind. And I think it's all about each entity having their own value system to say what do we want to communicate, with what responsibility do we want to communicate, what is our own assessment of the risk in what we are talking. Because like I said, with advice, the challenge of advice in investing, the unique thing is it is right as well as wrong. It is just at different points in time. So crypto was right 3 years back, because when a lot of people would say कि इतना पैसा बन गया और तुमको मालूम ही नहीं है. So it was right. Crypto is wrong today. So any advice is right as well as wrong, just the time horizons are different. So the lens to judge advice or outcomes in investing are always very, very superfluous, and which is why intent is very important.
Engagement with financial influencers by mutual funds, you're saying it is permissible, but you need to be a little bit more
responsible towards it. More responsible, what type of messaging. And like I said, what we need to do is, get the best out of both. Let responsibility come with experience and history, and let the art of talking to consumers in their language in an interesting manner. Not necessarily, it could be even entertaining, but if you can deliver entertainment with responsibility, that is the best of both worlds. So we cannot be binary. We can't be only responsible and boring, then the message will not reach people. We cannot be only entertaining but oversimplify so much that you have not highlighted the things that can go wrong. So like I always say in every debate where I've been invited, I always say that we are here to debate, but it doesn't have to be or, it can be and. We can take the best of everything, we can eliminate the worst of everything, and try to create a better outcome.
Okay, thank you, Kalpen. And with this, we come to an end to this panel. A round of applause for all 3 of our panelists. And thank you so much for patiently listening. Thank you.